Tuition from Beyond the Grave, a short ghost story by Tim Harvey. I started to learn the organ when I was 15 and was initially taught by David Reynolds, who was the director of music at St Nicholas Church in Newbury in Berkshire. He was a very competent organist who really lacked any sense of humour, but communicated the basics well and set me on a long and fruitful music journey as an organist and now director of music in Wilmslow. Fellow organists will know how difficult it is to find a suitable practice organ in a convenient location, especially for a keen 15-year-old. I was lucky enough to have access to a fine 3-manual Foster and Andrews organ at St Lawrence's in Hungerford, Berkshire. The charming organ was located in a large west gallery, and when you played it in a marcato fashion, the whole gallery would bounce in sympathy. I loved that organ. I spent about 3 years practicing on this organ, often late evening after completing my homework. I sang in the small choir, and I played the occasional hymn. The Church of St Lawrence is hidden away down by the Kennetonavon Canal, some way behind the main town centre. It is a dramatic sight when first seen, peeking through the trees from the road. It appears to be a magnificent piece of medieval perpendicular architecture, with castellations and pinnacles everywhere. However, it is a Regency Gothic revival, only built in 1814, probably in imitation of the real thing at Newbury. Its bath stone was brought up the canal. Access is via 2 pathways through the graveyard, which is often shrouded in mist during the winter months, owing to its location next to Freeman's Marsh and the canal. It was about 7:30 on a February evening in 1978, and I was busy practicing on the wonderful Foster and Andrews organ. It was dark outside, with a heavy mist, and I had a few lights on scattered around the church so I could see what was going on from the organ gallery. Even though you played with your back to the nave, there was a large mirror, so you had a wide view of the building. I never used to lock myself in, as I felt perfectly safe in the organ loft. I had practiced my set pieces and completed the tedious scales ready for my grade 7 exam, and was just improvising, going through the tone colours of the organ. I was aware of someone watching me from the nave of the church. I thought no more about it, as people often came in when they heard the organ. Every now and then I would look up, and the young adult male had moved to a different position of the church, but was still looking up at me. 15 minutes passed, and I was ready to go home. I switched off the blower and slid the heavy oak doors together to cover the console. I climbed off the raised stool and walked down the long staircase into the nave. It was at this point that I could see the man clearly. He was about 28, smooth-shaven, with short dark hair. He looked rather out of place, as he was wearing tweed plus floors, long brown socks, and brown brogue shoes. I smiled at him as I walked towards him. "I really enjoyed your improvisation, young man," he said. "Thank you. You certainly get the full colour out of this fine instrument. Your phrasing is good, and your registration growing in confidence and clarity." I blushed with encouragement, but silently enjoyed the attention. "You know, Tim, you would benefit from playing your set pieces more. I noticed you skipped through them, but didn't correct the few small mistakes you made. Focus on this, and you will do well," he continued. I thanked him, wondering how he knew my name, and turned to go out and put my 50p piece in the collection box. When I returned, the tall, distinguished man was not there, and I had not heard the main door close. It was a heavy oak door in need of some oil, and it used to announce one's arrival with a proud, long squeak, finally punctuated with a loud clunk. I had not heard him arrive, as I had been playing loudly, nor had I heard him leave in the silence of the church. I had to search the church to see where he was, to avoid locking him in. I looked in the usual places, but he was nowhere to be found. I turned out the remaining lights, locked the oak door, making its usual farewell creak, and made a hasty departure. I climbed onto my old rusty bike and cycled at speed through the misty, cold graveyard. When I arrived early at church on the following Sunday morning, I spoke with the elderly sexton, who had spent his whole life attached to the church. I described the man who had been listening to me, and Mr. Bennet smiled as he cleaned his spectacles. "Oh, so you've met Wing Commander Brown? He pops into church every now and then. He loves organ music, and if passing, he will come and have a listen." "I'm not familiar with that name," I replied. "Where does he live?" Mr. Bennet sat down to rest his legs. Wing Commander Brown was the church organist from 1938 to 1940. He was a fine organist and was called up to train as a fighter pilot in the Second World War. He was sadly shot down in September 1940, and his body was never found. A cold, icy shiver ran up and down my spine. "He's dead?" "Yes, and such a sad loss to the church. Wing Commander James Brown appears every now and then, especially when the organ is played. Not everyone sees him, but you were very honoured to be spoken to." The colour was draining from my face. "Tim, don't worry. He's a benign spirit who walks this beautiful church from time to time. He means no harm." I thanked Mr. Bennet for the information and got ready for the choir practice. Many years later, in 2019, I was rehearsing at my home church again for a recital. I knew James Brown was standing behind me. I could feel him, but I couldn't see him in the mirror. But I knew he was there to wish me well.